Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to go on a journey that will honestly completely reshape how you think about experiencing art. I want you to just imagine for a second leaving behind the bustling cities, the crowded streets, and stepping out into the crisp, thin air of the Highlands in Nagano Prefecture. We're heading to a place that feels way less like a gallery and much more like this vast, awe-inspiring open-air stage. It's a place where the boundaries between human creation and the wild natural world just beautifully dissolve.
When you picture an art museum, what usually comes to mind? Probably, hushed voices, dim lighting, maybe thick glass protecting priceless treasures, and stark white walls carefully separating you from the outside world. But I've got to ask you a fundamental question, one that this whole explainer is going to explore in depth. What if nature itself became part of the artwork? Like, what if a museum didn't just display sculptures, but actually invited the earth, the sky, and the weather to actively collaborate with them?
Okay, let's dive into this. On the one hand, we have exactly what we just talked about, the traditional museum. It's this sterile environment of climate control, glass barriers, and protective walls, all designed to preserve art by essentially freezing it in time. But look at the total contrast here. The Utsukushigahara Open-Air Museum absolutely shatters that paradigm. Instead of a roof, it has an endless sky. Instead of climate control, you've got mountain wind and shifting clouds. And instead of cramped little galleries, it offers 13 hectares of sprawling open space. It is a wildly unpredictable canvas.
Section 1. A museum without walls. Before we can really understand the art, we have to understand the canvas itself. Utsukushigahara, which literally translates to beautiful plain, sits right within the Utsukushigahara Highlands Quasi-National Park. Now, unlike the steep, jagged peaks you might normally associate with the Japanese Alps, Utsukushigahara is this really broad volcanic plateau. It spreads gently across these wide grasslands, basically acting as a massive natural balcony overlooking central Japan. From up here, you can see the rugged Northern Alps, the Central Alps, the Southern Alps, and, if you catch it on a clear day, even the iconic silhouetted Mount Fuji nearly 200 kilometers away.
And here's the number that really puts all this into perspective. 2,000. This plateau sits roughly 2,000 meters above sea level. So this isn't just some outdoor park down in a valley. This is extreme exposure. At this altitude, life is never, ever predictable. Brilliant sunshine can vanish into dense fog in literally minutes. Powerful winds sweep across the grass, and thunderstorms can just materialize out of nowhere. It's an environment of constant, dramatic change.
Section 2. Art above the clouds.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the intentional contrast between two sister museums. Back in 1969, Japan opened its very first open-air sculpture museum in Hakone, and that space was intimate, it was wooded and very sheltered, and it proved that art could exist outside in these carefully manicured gardens. But when the founders opened Utsukushigahara later, in 1981, they didn't want to just copy Hakone, not at all. They chose this expansive landscape with practically zero trees. They specifically wanted the endless sky. They deliberately chose a completely exposed, untamed landscape just to see what happens when art is placed entirely at the mercy of the elements.
Section 3. Collaborating with nature.
This totally illustrates how human creativity kind of has to surrender control up here. Take César Baldaccini's monumental thumb sculpture, for instance. Now, if you put that in a city plaza, it would look like this towering giant of human ingenuity, right? But out here, against the backdrop of the massive Alps, its scale is completely dwarfed by the mountains. It really humbles you. Next, you have Susumu Shingu's kinetic art. He designs these incredibly graceful forms without any motors. Instead, they move invisibly with the mountain wind, giving actual physical shape to the air itself. And finally, consider the massive steel and stone structures. No one is out there polishing them every day. Instead, nature's weathering acts as a slow, natural brushstroke over time.
You see, nature actually brings its own toolkit to this museum. Think about whistling winds whistling through openings in the metal, morning dew just glistening on bronze, lichens slowly, quietly growing over granite blocks, or snow settling into crevices and completely altering the silhouettes of the pieces. Cloud shadows race across the ground, and rain physically polishes the surfaces. And here's the thing, these forces aren't causing damage. In a traditional indoor museum, this would literally be a conservator's worst nightmare. But here, the mountain itself is the ultimate curator, quietly adding its own edits to every single piece.
Section 4. 4 seasons of art.
Notice how this seasonal cycle builds a totally different experience depending on exactly when you visit. Spring is this kind of cautious awakening. The air gets super clear, fresh green grass pushes up through patches of lingering snow, and the sculptures almost seem to stretch and wake up. Then you hit summer. Deep blue skies, drifting white clouds, and cool breezes turn the whole place into this bright, optimistic stage. Autumn completely transforms the plateau into a golden sea of amber grasses. The humidity drops, mountain visibility becomes unbelievably sharp, and the low sun casts these long, dramatic, really theatrical shadows off the art. And finally, winter. Deep snow completely blankets the plateau. The walking paths disappear, and the sculptures become these half-buried, silent mysteries in a profoundly quiet, frozen landscape. It is, essentially, 4 entirely different museums.
Section 5. The Mountain's Masterpiece.
So, the crucial point is, the empty space between these sculptures is just as important as the art itself. The curators purposely place the works really far apart. And that distance, it gives you time to wonder, to let your mind wander as you approach. The art pieces actually act as lenses. A curved piece of steel might perfectly echo the line of a distant mountain ridge. A circle cut right through a sculpture suddenly frames the sky. The art is actively teaching visitors to slow down, to stop looking down at their phones and to truly look up at the clouds, the horizon, and all that amazing empty space.
This deep respect for the landscape, it's woven into the very history of the plateau itself. Long before anyone ever thought of an art museum, this was a summer grazing ground for cattle and horses, accessible by the stunning Venus Line Scenic Drive. Take a look at Utsukushigahara, the Tower of Beauty. It's this sturdy stone bell tower built not for art, but for sheer survival. Because the mountain fog here can roll in so suddenly and be so impossibly dense, this tower's bell guided lost travelers through the mist. It's a permanent, standing reminder of the mountain's unpredictable, untamed rhythm. Ultimately, the art is really just a guest in the mountain's house.
There's this one phrase that just perfectly nails the whole philosophy of Utsukushigahara. It is the museum that refuses to stand still. It completely rejects that static preservation of indoor galleries. I mean, every passing cloud alters the exhibition. Every single sunrise creates a brand new viewing gallery. No human curator could ever plan it, and no artist could ever fully predict it.
I want to leave you with this thought as we wrap up today's explainer. Is beauty something we preserve by locking it away in a climate-controlled room and making sure it stays exactly the same forever? Or does true beauty exist precisely because it is fleeting, because it changes, because it actively responds to the wind, the rain, and the snow? The Utsukushigahara Open-Air Museum proves that art absolutely doesn't have to be separated from nature to be profound. In fact, when we actually let the passing seasons and shifting clouds leave their mark, we realize that the ultimate masterpiece is the mountain itself. Thank you so much for exploring this with me, and I really hope it changes how you look at the world around you.